So hi there, and welcome to this South by Southwest 2021 panel. My name is Hillary Lloyd, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Corporate Responsibility for The Body Shop in North America. Today's panel centers around mission or purpose-based businesses taking true action. Consumer research tells us that more and more consumers are looking to engage with brands and businesses that have strong purpose. So for today's panel, we want to dive into authenticity around business-based purpose. So specifically the elements that drive purpose-led values and those that do not, what authenticity looks like for purpose-led businesses, including its challenges and its opportunities. We'll also talk about how consumers can discern authenticity, things to look out for, specifically where businesses may be purpose washing versus those who may be doing business for the purpose of doing good. The Body Shop, for example, is a beauty brand that believes that business should be a force for good. The Body Shop's founder, Anita Roddick, built the business with this core principle in mind. Our mission is to fight for a fairer, more beautiful world. And the Body Shop lives and fulfills this mission through our activism, our programs, and of course, our global collective of change makers. The Body Shop has long used the power of business to fight for social and environmental progress. And we have this in common with our other B Corp partners who are on this panel, all champions of social justice. One of those champions is, of course, Ben & Jerry's, which makes this the perfect moment to introduce Sean Greenwood, Ben & Jerry's grand poobah of public relations. So over to you, Sean.
It's a four-year degree, people. Don't be overly impressed. We do what we can. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Ben & Jerry's, just that folks know Ben & Jerry's as an ice cream business. What some people don't understand is that Ben & Jerry's considers itself, a 43-year-old aspiring social justice company that just happens to make the world's best ice cream. And while, it's okay that not everybody knows that, right? That's one of the things our co-founder, Ben Cohen, has said, the strongest bond that you can have with your fans is through shared values. So we know that not everyone will be inspired by every single one of our values. In our business in ice cream, we don't need every ice cream eater to have a pint of Ben & Jerry's in their freezers. What we do see is an incredibly strong bond with many of our fans who appreciate the deeper work we do. So it's more than just chunks and swirls, but also taking a stance and using our business as what Ben refers to as, commerce overall having the most powerful force in society today. So the question then is, how do we try to use that force for good and for progressive change? Civil rights icon John Lewis often is quoted saying that it's not just okay, but necessary to get into trouble, what he called good trouble. And that's where there's a progressive outcome to meet the needs of many in terms of equality, access, and treatment. We feel it's our role as a corporation, given that power, to be able to speak up and get into that good trouble. We were fortunate to partner with the late congressman to post an art exhibit at our tour facility in Vermont, which averages hundreds of thousands of visitors a year, to share his journey and lifelong struggle for equality. And that's how we include a concern that becomes action, right? It's not just about murals, but about the dedication to look throughout your entire business chain to see where you can have an impact, where you can walk the talk, and especially when it's not easy to run at controversy instead of running away from it. Right? That's why Ben & Jerry's has gotten involved with issues and campaigns along with products that support efforts around global warming, LGBTQ marriage equality, and has taken a real deep dive over the last 5 years into racial justice work. Beginning at Ben & Jerry's in 1988, I know I don't look that old, but stick with me. My 3 decades of being part of the effort has given me this real unique perspective, not only as an employee, but also as an observer of what Ben & Jerry's does. And after the first year of Ben & Jerry's business, right, from 1978 to 79, the founders offered 2 slogans to represent their business aspirations. And those were that business has a responsibility to give back to the community. And the second one was, if it's not fun, why do it? So those were the 2 founding principles for the business for almost the first 10 years. Then in 1988, we closed down the entire business, my first year with Ben & Jerry's. So everyone from manufacturing to tours to operations, we all went to an offsite location and were presented with a mission statement that was proposed by our board of directors. The board had framed up the company's mission in 3 equally weighted areas: product, social, and economic. So product was, as you can guess, to make the finest desserts possible. Economic is making a fair profit, not just maximizing shareholder profit, as most businesses might have in their mission, and supporting employees with fair pay and fair opportunities. Then the social mission is the last one, and that's the area which allows Ben & Jerry's to stand apart. Right? It was a pioneering role, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, for a business to consider more than simply donating a small part of its revenue to be able to really help out. And so that part for Ben & Jerry's allowed us to kind of excel in a unique way. How we then incorporate that is into our values. We take our business operations. So one of the issues like purchasing, right? So this could be in a large scale practice like supporting the fair trade movement, which Ben & Jerry's signed on to do to support farmers in developing countries to be guaranteed a fair wage and receive a premium to spend for local relief, such as a hospital or community center. But as an ice cream maker also that's making flavors with brownies, we could purchase the cheapest brownie possible to try to maximize the profits on that flavor. That doesn't jive with our social mission, though. And so instead, we practice values-led sourcing to purchase ingredients from vendors which have the most positive impact in their community, right? And allow it to survive and thrive. And so the bakery you're going to hear from next is kind of the crown jewel of that model. Who says you can't make lemonade out of lemons? This is a chance for us to look at a community need, which is what the Grayson Bakery has done in Yonkers, New York. And this is my first meeting with Mr. Joe Kenner. So Joe is the CEO of Grayson Bakery. He's going to talk you through their approach to values and social justice, open hiring, and how to make the best damn brownie you've ever tasted. So we're honored to continue our partnership with Grayson over 30 years. They're an inspiration to us. We've learned a ton from them. So here to tell you about it is Joe Kenner.
Thank you so much, Sean and Hillary. And it's good to be with two great partners of Grayson, Ben & Jerry's and The Body Shop. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I'm excited. I don't have the cool title like Brand Poobah, but President and CEO of Grayson is good enough. But we have a saying at Grayson that we don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people. And that's the focus. It's on the people that we hire. It's on the people that we support. Our founder, Bernie Glassman, came up with this idea 40 years ago almost. He and his Zen Buddhist community in the Riverdale section of Bronx, they were supporting themselves baking cakes. That's how they supported the community that they had in the Riverdale section of Bronx. And Bernie noticed in this area, which is where I am in Southwest Yonkers, that at that time in the early 80s, high unemployment, AIDS was at its height in terms of people being excluded from housing and other opportunities. Folks that had criminal backgrounds couldn't get work. And Bernie and this community, they realized that, how can we elevate community? How can we tackle poverty? What's the one thing that we can do to create a thriving community in this area? And he literally started pulling people off the streets to help them bake cakes in Riverdale. And it was at the Grayson Mansion is where they lived, which is how we got our name. But that's how Bernie brought people in. Hey, I'll teach you a trade at the entry level, and hopefully you can learn a skill, have something to put on a resume that you can build up your career and do something better in the future. That's literally how what we now call open hiring was born, by literally pulling people off the streets. And today we now make, world-class brownies for a world-class customer like Ben & Jerry's. We sell our brownies in Whole Foods and other places, but they're made by people that, many would have considered unemployable. So it's the formerly incarcerated, it's the homeless person, it's the person dealing with substance abuse or recovery, folks dealing with mental health issues, single mother that can't get childcare. It's all of those folks that cannot get into the workforce for whatever reason. They have a barrier. And it's about 10 million folks across this country that fall into that category. So this is a huge nut that we need to crack as a mission-minded organization and organizations. We got to figure out a way to get folks into the workforce. And we've been doing it through what we call open hiring. And what that means essentially is, you put your name on a list, and when the next job becomes available, you get it. We don't ask questions. We don't do background checks. And we don't do interviews. You just report for orientation. And that is your first day on the job. That's your first day to getting benefits. That's your first day to a 401k. That's your first day of hope for a lot of the folks that we service, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, I just want to have hope. I want to have a future. I want tomorrow to be better than today. So when they put their name on that list, they're trusting us with that. And we give that to them. And it's a job, it's a belonging. Some folks at the bakery like to say it's a family. And you're a part of that family, and we will support you every step of the way on your journey. All that we ask is that you resolve to want to be successful. That you resolve to, you want to learn. You want to come to work every day. You want to produce awesome brownies for our customers and, provide great tasting products to our consumers all over the world, really, because we're part of Ben & Jerry's global supply chain. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that we can do this as mission-minded companies because, we're not just making a good product. We're not just, obviously delivering on the bottom line in terms of financials, but we're actually unlocking talent. We're unlocking economic development. We're addressing criminal justice issues. We're addressing workforce development issues, racial equity issues. All of those things are being tackled when you buy a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream with a Grayson brownie in it. It's amazing.
That's amazing, Joe. Thanks so much, Joe and Sean, both, for that really helpful context. Joe, in particular, I just wanted to flag and sort of call out that certainly Grayson's work and partnership around inclusive or open hiring has been a critical enabler for the successful launch of the Body Shop North America's inclusive hiring programs in the United States and more recently in Canada. So we just sort of wanted to express some appreciation for sort of building the model for others to follow. I think that that's a critical piece around mission-led business, is that it's sort of, it's a club where everyone is welcome. So we really, really appreciate the guidance and sort of, and all of the support you've provided there. Okay, we want to dive into our first area of exploration. So the first topic, and the first topic is, of course, around authenticity when it comes to purpose or mission-led business. So specifically, what differentiates surface approaches, things we might see in marketing campaigns, from those which truly pursue social justice. So Sean, we'll start with you. And the more specific question is this: what are the key lessons or drivers for businesses and consumers alike in understanding what is and what is not on purpose? I'm hoping you can kick us off.
Yeah, certainly. I think when we began the discussion around this panel, right, I think I purposely suggested a stronger title for our session, which started with a 4-letter word followed by the words purpose washing, right? And it's not that all businesses need to try to be social justice businesses. It's just our belief is that businesses should find a way to support their local community where they operate, right? So they should have some interest in something related to their company outside of just making profits. Right. And it's not that Ben & Jerry's is any different in terms of being called out for purpose washing. Right. Often I'll speak to groups of other business people or students, and someone will say, we get it. You do good things, so people will like you and buy your products. And nothing is further from the truth. Right. As a company, we take a stance on issues that we believe in. But in my 30 years with the company, I've never sat in around a meeting room and talked about our next social justice campaign. And here, I've heard the words, well, that won't sell ice cream. Let's not bother doing that, right? That's not why we do this. And so I think that argument could be made on taking stances. People might say that could be a bad thing for your company. The truth is, for us, when we look at what we've done in our history, no matter what we've gotten into for issues, from global warming to marriage equality to racial justice, our sales have continued to grow quite steadily year after year. The second is we have our own consumer services team in Vermont that interacts with our fans. And even with all the controversy that Ben & Jerry's gets involved with, what do you think the percentage of contacts are that are upset by our position? 1% of the people who contact us, right? Phone, email, message us and say, you ruffled my feathers because of what you did. There are 13% of the people who don't get enough chunks in their ice cream. 1% are upset because of our taking a controversial stance. So it's something that we say, maybe it's a sign that we need to push a little harder. So our belief as a values-led organization is, how do we get out there and use this power to learn from the experts, right? Because we're experts in one thing, in making great ice cream. So we learn from experts. So take racial justice, we might go to the ACLU or NAACP or the Color of Change. And as we learn from those folks, we grow our own institutional knowledge. And then we share that with our fans in hopes to bring them along and the public at large to join us in that journey. Right? Because Ben & Jerry's partners with these folks, it helps us understand where we can make an impact, how we can take concrete action, and measure that work that we've done. Right? So that's in a stark contrast to cause-related marketing. Right? So people will say, They think as a cause-related marketer, you'll say, how do I find something that's going to convince a possible consumer to buy my goods or services because of aligning myself with something? Right. And to us, we think there's this deeper opportunity. Right. And I think what we see in terms of the community at large is 18 to 35-year-olds want to support businesses that have a true purpose and that act on that in authenticity. Right. So if you're not thinking about that as a business, you may want to start, because if you want to be surviving in business in the next 10 or 20 years, we think customers are going to be demanding that even more so.
Really great points. Just wondering, Joe, if you want to build from there.
Oh yeah, how much time do we have? So, as you listen to Sean and I talk, and the one thing that keeps rising to the top is just intentionality, right? As Sean said, every business can find a reason for its being in a particular community. So, for us, it's employment. It's giving opportunities to folks who are the underserved and the underrepresented. I mean, that's why we exist. What is your intention to solve a problem? What is that problem? And how can you address it? What's your solution to that problem? And what's the timeline and what's the metrics of success that you can say, like, you know what, we identified this problem. Here's what we see as the cause of the problem. Here's how we're going to address it. We're going to do it in 3 years, 5 years, and here's how you can measure us. When somebody does that, you've told me how authentic you are. You've told me that you are truly intentional, as opposed to just issuing a PR statement, giving money to XYZ nonprofit or XYZ social cause, and then in 10 years from now, when we go through another issue, we'll talk about it again. I mean, I could go back to Rodney King in 1991, 92, and, we're still having the same conversation, aren't we? Because we haven't solved the problem. We haven't gotten to the crux of the issue. We keep treating these symptoms and, issuing our statements and, making all these, platitudes, but we haven't actually tackled the root cause of the problems. And for us, it's employment and giving opportunities to those who've been left out, that 10 million or so folks. So when folks tell me, one, how they've identified the problem and how they're going to solve it, how they're going to measure it over a certain period of time, you've got my attention. You've said to me you're authentic. You've said to me you're intentional, like Sean outlined. That tells me that you're about something because you've been doing it. You've been making an impact in your particular area. I can see metrics. I can see timeline. But other than a statement, that's really all it is at the end of the day. You haven't really changed anything. You've just kind of told me, like, oh, yeah, this is bad, but what are you going to do about it? I mean, I don't need you to agree with me. We need you to solve the problem.
I agree. It's interesting. I think you've both touched on two really interesting topics for me. The first is sort of reporting and accountability. And I think, for businesses and consumers both, I actually think perhaps in a really practical context, certifications like B Corp help. Frankly, certified B corporations, for reference for everyone, are communities of global businesses who seek business as a force for good. And becoming certified B Corp requires a rigorous assessment process where you meet standards of social and environmental performance. And critical as part of that process is, Joe, exactly what you've said: reporting, transparency, and accountability. And specifically, the process is ongoing. So it's not a one and done thing. So I do really think from a consumer view, look out for B Corps. They're out there in the world. Find them if you're interested. I think it's a really nice way to sort of connect yourselves to businesses who share an authenticity. And I think as a business, I think the B Corp certification is a touchstone. It becomes kind of this ongoing way of making sure that you have the checks and balances in place so that you're securing the right processes and the ways of working on an ongoing basis. The other point that I think, Sean, that you raised, which is really interesting, is the one around cause marketing versus, let's say, mission-led approaches. I mean, the Body Shop specifically sort of prides itself. One of our core values is that we are an activist brand, specifically. And so the pursuit of social justice through activism should, from our view, likely extend beyond advocacy into action or commitment, if that makes sense. So things like practically seeking, and again, with help along the way and guidance and support so we can gain institutional knowledge, but practically seeking fundamental, often legislative change. Sort of let there be an end, let there be a goal in mind. I would argue that That's a strong litmus test when it comes to evaluating the extension beyond just cause or beyond just advocacy, which is great, but specifically in communications into action seeking. I think you find authenticity when it comes to this case of reporting action-based sort of action seeking. I think it's essential. And I think authenticity lives there, certainly. Anything else on that topic, guys? Okay, we're going to move on to our second area of discussion then. So again, Sean and Joe, this is for both of you, but Sean, this time around, again, we'll start with you.
Okay.
The question is this: why, from your perspective, should people care about mission-led business? And then along the way, I'm hoping that you can help us understand some of the challenges specifically faced by your company through your own experience at Ben & Jerry's.
Certainly. Yeah. I think we feel it's important to care about the topic, these issues authentically. I think Joe said intentionality, right? And I think it's what we're talking about for all of our businesses. It's activating on purpose because it's essential to your business. It's core to who you are, right? And when you incorporate that concern in an authentic and compassionate kind of way, that focus just becomes part of your corporate structure and your actions. I think you can be appreciated for getting involved with issues of importance that way. Too often, a lot of businesses we talk with will say, what's the return on investment of doing this social justice type work? And usually I reply saying, if you're asking what the ROI is, you're really asking the wrong question. Right? Your action should be undertaken because it's something you believe in and it provides something that your potential customers can believe in you about. And it's not to say that it's easy or that it's not without challenges, right? I think, we've seen it before in Ben & Jerry's businesses that's come up before, right? We've done it when we first took a stance to support the Black Lives Matter movement 5 years ago. It was probably a different response, whereas when we took a response after the murder of George Floyd last year to talk about it and say white supremacy must be dismantled, what we see is the reaction from the community has changed. Right. Many of the folks who are called out after saying they stand with those movements, like, definitely last year, other businesses were being challenged by outsiders asking what they've done. Right. If you say we stand with our Black brothers and sisters at this difficult time, consumers are saying, what do you do when you stand with us? What does that mean? What's the action that your business takes? And I think that's a good thing, that businesses are not just throwing their hat into the ring and saying, we're going to go out and jump on the bandwagon. Right? People should be core to that part within their company to help bring that idea to their company, say we need to stand for something. We need to have a bigger impact that way. And it's not that we want other businesses to be us, right? Ben & Jerry's shouldn't try to be Patagonia, and Patagonia shouldn't try to be Lush Cosmetics. Like, every business knows what to do for their own structure and interest in operations within their own supply chain. But having that area to focus on allows businesses to hone in and truly add value to our community.
And I would say this, let's not lose sight of the fact that it is a good business model. So when we look at, what Grayson does, and working with, two of my partners right here, particularly on the body shop, I'm going to brag on you a little bit, Hillary, but it's part of our DNA at Grayson to extend opportunities, employment opportunities to folks. That's the biggest challenge for us, is changing that narrative, changing that dynamic, that thinking around, how do we hire people? How do we bring people into our organization? Or the flip side, how do we keep people out? And what needs to change so that we can bring in good talent? So Body Shop, perfect example. We started working with you guys back in 2019, and you introduced open hiring in your distribution centers, and you saw almost a 2/3 reduction in your turnover rate. Productivity went up like 13%. And now you've got open hiring in your retail operations and hundreds of opportunities being extended to folks. 75% of whom are now saying, they have a better future now because they work at their Body Shop, because they went through the inclusive hiring. You're calling it inclusive hiring process. That is huge. And what is it? It's good business, right? You get good talent. You're still selling amazing products, but you're bringing in folks that probably would not have had that opportunity otherwise. And half of the folks that you brought in, I believe, have barriers to employment. All of those folks that we were talking about. Wouldn't that be awesome if other people adopted what Grayson, the Body Shop's doing? Working. We have this interdependency here with Grayson and Ben & Jerry's. But again, when you buy that pint of ice cream, you're supporting folks in Yonkers. You're supporting the mission of Ben & Jerry's at the same time. You're a part of something larger than just, eating a great product. So to me, it's like, this is an amazing business model. I try to get people to stop thinking that this is some kind of an either or proposition that we have to make. Do I make profit or do I do good? No, they're both the same. It's just a good business strategy. You get good talent, you deliver a great product and service, you take care of your employees and your suppliers. That's just what normal businesses do. And to Sean's point is, there is something that every business can do, and there's got to be something that you can impact, whether it's a school system, whether it's the local park, whatever it might be. Like I said, our DNA is just how do we extend more employment opportunities to folks. That's what we're going to focus on. That's what we're going to be about.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I agree wholeheartedly with both of you. I find myself so often saying now repeatedly in ongoing conversations with sort of, anyone who will listen, that the world needs more of the Body Shop and more Ben & Jerry's and more Grayston's right now. For the Body Shop, for over 40 years, we've been, pioneering beauty brand that's always focused on securing that profit and purpose are in harmony. It's all on the way. But it's what's driven principles of not testing our products on animals. It's what's driven our aim to help communities thrive through community fair trade programs. Sean, you talked about some of the same types of programs. It's fueled our campaigns and our initiatives centered around women's rights and women's empowerment. Joe, it's fueled our initiatives around inclusive hiring. And I think that if more people insisted or cared or chose to invest their hard-earned dollars with mission-led business, we'd see more of the body shops, so to speak, sort of a figurative mission-led approach in the world, even after 40 years. And it goes without saying, that would be a really good thing. So I think, I love the expression more is more. And I think in this case, more is really more. So my hope is that a growing constituency of people do continue to care and engage with mission-led business. I think it's essential. And I think the world needs it right now. Yeah.
And I would just add one thing that we keep touching on, but we need to highlight this, like the ages of our companies. We're all 40 years or greater. Business model seems to be working.
Right. It can be successful.
Yeah, it's like you guys, we're all 40 years or older. So it's like there's something about this model that seems to be working.
And the other thing is we're not perfect, right?
Exactly.
I think it's important to know. I think often people will come up and say, oh, you guys had this all figured out and you came out and rolled out this plan and everything was perfect. It's like, absolutely not. We figured out things as we went along. We made mistakes along the way, and that don't consider that the expectation of trying to bring values into your business is not about you are then once you reach perfection, then you can go out with it. That's not the work the three of us do, right? Our organizations are always learning and improving and making mistakes. And so it's the idea of trying to get involved with something and to know that when you do that work, you are going to be criticized. People will say you made a mistake here and there. That's going to happen, right? When we've been working on racial justice the last 5 years, one of the experts we had hired to coach us through says, I've been doing racial justice for 30 years. I make mistakes every day. Don't think you're going to be better than that.
Yeah, it's a great point.
And that's a good point to highlight, Sean. I need to highlight that as well, because, not everybody works out, at Grayston. You do have, and that's what pains me about there's the hardest part of the job. It's that, that one person, no matter how much you support them. I mean, we provide a social worker at our bakery, and if someone deals with their transportation issues, their housing issues, whatever their issues might be. But sometimes, as much as you might give that support, it just doesn't work out. And unfortunately, we have to part ways. That's hard. But at the end of the day, we're still a business. We still have to deliver a profit. I still have to support all the other initiatives that this company is all about, because I got to deliver products to world-class customers like a Ben & Jerry's and Whole Foods, and they're not going to skimp on quality, and I can't skimp on quality either when it comes to employment. So those are the tough decisions that you have to make. So to Sean's point, yeah, it's not going to always be perfect. And P.S. This is manufacturing. Long hours. You're lifting 50-pound bags of sugar and flour. Those things are that's not for everybody. But we give them the opportunity. We give folks the opportunity to be successful if you resolve to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to transition us onto our last topic. So we've talked about definitions around what is and is not mission or purpose-led business. We've talked really in a lot of detail around authenticity and the things that drive authenticity. We've talked about the challenges that come with leading with purpose and how perfection is not a certainty at all. And in fact, learning along the way is really, really important. And the last piece, in terms of shifting into, let's talk about the consumer perspective. So specifically, how have purpose-seeking consumers impacted how businesses approach this topic? And then further to that, are there any specific strategies for consumers who might not be aware or even care about brand or purpose mission? I don't know, Sean, you want to kick us off again?
So yeah, I'd say there certainly seems to be a growing interest in in authentic businesses taking action and making an impact on our globe in a positive manner, right? And many young consumers are purchasing with that intention. They understand the value of supporting a business. It's essentially a vote saying you support that business and their values. So you take as an example, walk onto a campus at any university, and it allows you to see the interest from water rights to fair trade purchases that today's college students are certainly much, much more savvy than we were 20 or 30 years ago. And we know that there are fans of Ben & Jerry's who purchase our products because they just like great ice cream. Along the way for us, there is that opportunity to bring those folks over, right? To share them why we act in a values-led way and what is it that we do, hopefully to provide an opportunity for that consumer to want to engage with us in a deeper conversation, right? Whether it's we're taking an action to prevent an oil pipeline being carved through the middle of the U.S. through native lands, or fighting for refugee rights throughout Europe, or battling the systemic oppression of Black and brown people in the U.S., to bring those fans along that journey. One of the cool things is Ben & Jerry's feels like it can be the on-ramp to those topics, right? Because it's hard to say, how can we do something individually? How can I, as an individual, go stand on the corner and scream about global warming or about systemic racism? Not going to get so much interest. But when we do it together with our fans, they understand this collective power that we have, right? As we bring them into that and we challenge them to take action, to join us in that, right? Collectively, as we reach out and bring on those thousands of people to help take this action together, that's the Ben & Jerry's sweet spot, if you will, right? It's like, how do we end up inspiring them, communicating these things, and bringing them along the work? That's where we make a true impact.
Yeah. And I would say for us, we're just going to continue to be who we are. And it's talking about our relationship with Ben & Jerry's. It's talking about, the partnership we have with you and Hillary in the Body Shop. There are 5 other pilots that we're working on: a grocery store chain, a consumer products company. We're just going to continue to communicate, what we're doing with these companies and why we're doing it, and the impact that we're all having collectively based on these various industries and these various, different contexts, different industries, and different levels of opportunities that are being extended. We're just going to keep talking about it. Because, we talk about, the millennials being this demographic that's very much mission-minded and, purpose-driven. But I really believe it's becoming a broader psychographic. Like, they're looking for the products, where's my dollar going? But they're also looking at, where am I working? People are looking at, is the place where I'm spending 8 to 10 hours a day, is it driving some of the things that I really care about? Or is it hindering the things that I'm caring about? So I think folks are really starting to focus on how they spend their dollars, but also like how they spend their time in terms of where they want to work. And for us, we're going to continue to be who we are. It's in our DNA to extend employment opportunities. It's in our DNA to want to see others do it. And, it's just about getting the message out and just continuing to reinforce, the impact that we're having and why we want to have this impact and why it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Joe, you said several times, sort of, we're just going to continue to be who we are, which I think is a really it's a nice way of framing the conversation around authenticity, if that makes sense. I think certainly we need to acknowledge that, purpose has become an industry buzzword, and that brands and businesses more and more are building programs designed to meet customers' expectations around values and mission. I think that there is some skepticism there, but I think more importantly, I think overall, if you had to sort of weigh the skepticism versus sort of taking a really positive view on it, my view is that overall it's a good thing. I think, again, just coming back to it, transparency, authenticity, and reporting, and even action sort of are guiding lights for mission-led programs. Otherwise, there might be risk for further skepticism. But as long as that exists, I think sort of, being mission-led is well underway in a really great practical practice. I think also more examples of businesses who push or motivate others to do the same or go further. So things that we are learning from Grayson and from Ben & Jerry's is a really, really good thing. And I think the more is more principle is important, because I think creating higher consciousness for consumers who may not care is important. It grows opportunities for businesses like ours and like the Body Shop. Of course, we want more young, ethically engaged women in particular to connect with businesses like ours and with our values, because the more of them that we have engaged with our business, the more we can fulfill our mission, which is to fight for a fairer and more beautiful world. So there's this really nice sort of reciprocal relationship that exists around it. So I think you're right. Both of you are right in that there's more caring. There's certainly more engagement than we've ever seen in the past. And I think it's a really good thing, because I think it means that we can, to your point, Joe, just continue to be ourselves on these mission-led journeys.
And for the companies that are kind of skeptical, I mean, let's not try and boil the ocean. I mean, every company is going to be different. They're all going to start at a different spot. Some can be the Body Shop and just go out on the deep end and say, our whole North American operations are going to implement open hiring. But, take bite sizes depending on your particular culture and, where you are as an organization. And, one job could be an open hiring job. That could be your purpose, just our front desk person or the landscaping company, or the maintenance, whatever it might be. But sometimes it's, stop trying to be so big, but just think about, the small area within your company where you could have an impact, or within your community where you could have an impact. And, don't try to boil the ocean if that's not where your company is right now, but take those baby steps to get there.
It's a great point, Joe. I was talking with a group of communications, like professional PR group, about racial justice. And at the end of the talk, one of the individuals said, I have a small independent business. I don't have a team of 6 or 8 social mission people like one of these big companies that like a Ben & Jerry's. I don't have millions of dollars, to be able to put a program in place. So how do I act on social justice? And I said, I bet if you were a small independent franchisee owner of a auto parts store, and you said, I want to support racial justice in my community, I'm going to donate $500 and put that into a fund. And then I'm going to put a cup out on the desk and ask for 500 other customers coming in to each donate $1. And then we're going to take that $1,000 and give it to a local automotive school as a scholarship for a young mechanic of color, for someone to come in and get a $1,000 scholarship. It would be tremendous to be able to say that's all you need to do is something within your own community that can make an impact, that can show you care. And it's not about, do you have 30 full-time people working trying to figure out how to solve these issues? It's about everybody doing a little part. And I think that part, if people can get over that hump and then say, I did something there, I made a nice little impact, then what can you do next, right? And I think the challenge is to not do one of those and then go out and put 7 press releases about it and call the local news. Do it because it's the right thing to do. And then maybe around the 10th time that something happens, I guarantee you before the 10th time, people are going to be there already with a television crew saying, we want to talk to you about that. We love that you're doing this and taking an action. And it doesn't have to be something that's so large that it is boiling the ocean.
Yeah. And do it because you see yourself as a critical piece to the solution, and that's the intentional piece of it. It's like, that person can, maybe you can just raise money for a scholarship. That's a very easy thing to do. And that can have a huge impact on somebody's life. And maybe that's your role. To your point, it may not be the multi-billion dollar company, but that small business, that medium-sized business, that large business, as business leaders, we can solve problems, can we not? So depending on our size, just figure out what that problem is and how you can impact it, and then go that way. But start. But I would just say start intentionally.
Good advice. Good advice. Well, that is a wrap on our panel. So for everyone who's listened or taken part, thank you for attending South by Southwest 2021. Thank you, of course, to Joe and Sean for joining me on this panel. And to see more from businesses who aim to take true action, like Grayson and Ben & Jerry's and the Body Shop, follow the listed details. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks for having us.